You can't see someone's bank balance. You can't see their net worth, but you can see what they buy. And researchers who study financial behavior have found that just 3 categories of purchases predict someone's actual financial trajectory more reliably than their income, their job title, or even the neighborhood they live in. Not because the purchases themselves are good or bad, but because of what the decision behind each one reveals about how that person handles money when nobody's watching. In this video, we're breaking down all 3, what they are, why they're such strong signals, and what they might be quietly revealing about your own financial direction, whether you've thought about it that way or not. This one might make you look at your last few purchases differently. We're not talking about lifestyle guilt here. This isn't about shaming what you buy. It's pattern recognition, the same way a doctor doesn't need your whole history to notice a few telling signs. Once you see what these 3 purchases are measuring, you'll likely see your own financial picture a lot more clearly too. Before we get into the 3, here's why this works at all. Income tells you how much money comes in. It says nothing about what happens to it after that. 2 people earning the exact same salary can end up in completely different financial positions 10 years later, and the difference almost never shows up in their paycheck. It shows up in their spending decisions, made consistently, over time. Behavioral economists call this the difference between financial inflow and financial behavior, and behavior is what actually compounds. A purchase is a decision made under real constraints, timing, pressure, comparison to others, which is exactly why it reveals more than a number on a pay stub ever could. The 3 purchases we're covering aren't random. They're the ones researchers keep finding show up again and again as the clearest behavioral signals. It's worth pausing on that word, signal. None of these 3 purchases cause an outcome by themselves, but signals show up early, often years before the bigger financial picture becomes obvious in a bank statement, which is exactly what gives you time to adjust course. Purchase number 1, the car you drive, and more specifically, how you paid for it. Notice this isn't about whether the car is expensive or cheap. A modest car bought outright and a modest car financed for 6 years on a high interest rate look identical in the driveway, but they represent 2 completely different financial trajectories. Researchers looking at auto lending data consistently find that the size of a car payment relative to income combined with the loan length is one of the strongest early predictors of financial strain, because a car is usually the first large financed purchase most people make, and the habits formed around it, how much debt feels normal, how long a loan feels acceptable, tend to carry forward into every large purchase after it. Financial counselors often say they can learn more from someone's auto loan terms in 5 minutes than from an hour discussing their monthly budget. The car is usually the first real test of how someone handles a large finance decision, and first tests tend to set a template that rarely stays isolated to just the car. Here's the deeper signal underneath the car itself. The payment structure reveals your relationship with delayed cost. Someone who stretches a loan to keep the monthly payment artificially low is often optimizing for how things feel right now over what they'll actually cost over time. Someone who buys within a tighter budget, even if it means driving something less impressive, is usually optimizing the opposite way. Neither instinct is a moral failing. It's a pattern, and patterns repeat. The person who stretches the car loan for comfort today is statistically more likely to stretch the mortgage, the credit card, and eventually the retirement timeline the same way, because it's the same underlying decision made on a bigger scale each time. None of this means everyone who finances a car is heading for trouble, or that everyone who buys outright is fine. It's a tendency, not a certainty. But tendencies are exactly what researchers look for when predicting outcomes across large groups. If you've never calculated your own car payment to income ratio, it's worth doing, not to judge the past, but to understand what it's quietly setting up next. Purchase number 2, where you live, specifically how much of your income your housing actually consumes. This is often called the housing ratio, and financial planners have used a version of this signal for decades. because it's remarkably consistent. It's not about the size of your home or your neighborhood's reputation. It's about the percentage of your income going toward keeping a roof over your head every single month. Someone spending close to half their income on housing has dramatically less room for everything else: saving, investing, handling emergencies, regardless of how much they earn in absolute terms. Two people in identical homes on identical streets can have completely different financial futures if one of them is stretching to afford it and the other isn't. This is also why housing ratio tends to matter more than home price alone. A modest home that's comfortably affordable can leave someone with far more financial flexibility than an impressive home consuming every spare dollar each month, even if the address looks better on paper. What makes housing such a strong predictor isn't the purchase itself. It's that it's usually the largest fixed cost in someone's life, and fixed costs determine how much flexibility is even possible for everything else. Someone with room left over after housing has options. They can save aggressively, absorb a bad month, invest consistently. Someone stretched thin on housing is making every other financial decision from a position of tightness, even if their income looks strong on paper. This is why researchers keep coming back to the housing ratio specifically rather than home value or neighborhood. It's the number that quietly sets the ceiling on everything else someone can do financially, whether they've consciously noticed that ceiling or not. There's a reason planners often recommend keeping housing costs under roughly a third of take-home pay, even though that gets harder in expensive markets. It's the rough point where most people still have room left for savings and unexpected costs. Once housing creeps meaningfully past that point, nearly every other financial goal starts competing for whatever small amount of room remains. Purchase number 3 is the one people underestimate the most. Small, recurring purchases, subscriptions, delivery fees, daily convenience spending. Individually, none of these feel significant, which is exactly why there's such a strong signal. Someone who can list every subscription they're paying for and knows roughly what their convenience spending adds up to each month is demonstrating active awareness of their own cash flow. Someone who genuinely doesn't know is demonstrating the opposite, regardless of how much money they actually have. Researchers studying spending awareness consistently find that the number of unused or forgotten subscriptions someone is paying for correlates strongly with broader financial disorganization, not because a streaming subscription ruins anyone's finances, but because it's a visible symptom of a much bigger blind spot. Think about how easily a subscription survives untouched for years. A free trial that quietly converts, a service used once and forgotten, a fee that creeps up slightly each year. None of these are dramatic on their own, but the fact they can persist unnoticed says something real about how closely someone is watching their own cash flow. Here's why this one matters more than its dollar amount suggests. Small recurring purchases are the easiest category of spending to lose track of, because no single one feels worth the effort to think about, but awareness compounds the same way spending does. Someone who tracks these small things tends to notice bigger financial shifts faster too. A rate change, a fee increase, a spending pattern creeping upward. Someone who's numb to the small recurring stuff usually stays numb to the bigger patterns as well, until something forces a closer look. This is why financial researchers treat the subscription and convenience category less as a spending problem and more as a diagnostic. It's less about the money and more about whether someone's actually watching. This is why financial educators increasingly use a subscription audit as an entry point into someone's broader habits rather than a minor housekeeping task. The exercise is rarely about the dollar amount recovered. It's the moment of realizing how much can drift by unexamined, and that awareness, once switched on, tends to stay on. So to bring it together, the car you drive and how you financed it reveals your relationship with delayed cost. Your housing ratio reveals how much room you actually have for everything else. And your small recurring purchases reveal whether you're actively watching your money or letting it run on autopilot. None of these three on their own define your entire financial life. But together, researchers keep finding they predict trajectory more consistently than income alone, because they're not measuring what you earn, they're measuring how you decide. It's also worth noticing what these three have in common structurally. Each starts as a single decision made once that then repeats silently every month afterward without requiring a new decision each time. That's what makes them such powerful predictors. You're not looking at someone's willpower on any given day. You're looking at a decision made once that's now compounding quietly in the background, whether they're thinking about it or not. If one of these three hit close to home, here's how to actually use it. 1, if it's the car, don't rush to sell it. Just calculate what percentage of your income the payment represents and use that number, not the car itself, to guide your next purchase. 2, if it's housing, run the ratio honestly. If it's stretch, the fix isn't always moving. Sometimes it's adjusting everything around it until your situation changes. 3, if it's the small recurring purchases, spend 15 minutes this week listing every subscription and recurring charge you can find. Most people are surprised by at least one they'd forgotten entirely. None of these three fixes require a dramatic life change. They require the same thing all three purchases were measuring in the first place: a little more attention, applied consistently. If you want a simple starting point, pick whichever of the three felt most uncomfortable to hear about just now. That discomfort is usually a reliable indicator of where the most useful adjustment is waiting. Quick note: I'm Zyra, a research presenter, not a licensed financial advisor. These three signals reflect general patterns discussed in behavioral finance research, not a definitive judgment on your personal finances, and every situation has context a general video can account for. For guidance specific to your numbers, a licensed financial advisor is always the better resource. These three categories are meant as a lens for reflection, not a formula. And plenty of people with strong finances will still recognize themselves in one or more of them. If one of these three purchases described you a little too accurately, you're not alone. Comment which one hit closest: car, housing, or the small recurring stuff. If you want the full walkthrough on calculating your own housing ratio step by step, that video is coming soon, so subscribe so you don't miss it.